All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a deep dive into Wilbur Smith's A Falcon Flies.
Ah, A Falcon Flies.
You guys gave us excerpts from this one. It's set in 19th century Africa. An epic adventure. And I gotta say, I'm hooked already.
It's a real page-turner, that's for sure.
It is.
But there's a lot more to it than just adventure, you know. What makes A Falcon Flies so fascinating is how it brings history to life.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're talking about colonialism, the slave trade, the clash of cultures, big, heavy stuff.
It is.
But Smith weaves it all into this thrilling narrative. Makes you think, makes you feel.
Absolutely. And this is just the first book in his Ballantyne series, right?
It is, yeah, the first one.
So there's a whole world to explore here. I'm excited to see what historical truths we can unearth. Are we dealing with real-life figures who inspired these characters?
You might be surprised by how much of this story is rooted in reality.
Oh, intrigue. And how does this novel, A Falcon Flies, make us rethink the past, in a way that's relevant to us today?
Well, I think you'll find that history is a lot more nuanced and relevant than we might realize at first glance.
All right, I'm ready to unpack this. Let's start with the Ballantyne family, right at the beginning. We meet Robyn and Zouga. They're the children of, no, correct me if I'm wrong, a pretty famous missionary explorer guy, Fuller Ballantyne.
That's right, Fuller Ballantyne. Quite a character. A bit of a legend in his time.
Okay, so he was a real guy.
Oh, he was real, right. But like a lot of legends, the truth about Fuller Ballantyne is a bit more complicated than the stories you might have heard.
Ooh, okay, I like where this is going.
And his children, Robyn and Zouga, they inherit that complicated legacy. They're adventurers, drawn to the wild beauty of Africa. But they're also wrestling with, well, that age-old conflict between duty and freedom.
Yeah, I feel like that's something a lot of people can relate to, right? That pull between what's expected of us and what we truly desire.
It's a universal struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And it plays out in different ways for Robyn and Zouga.
Totally. And speaking of Zouga, he's struggling financially, right? Which seems to fuel his ambition to, well, strike it rich. Maybe find some diamonds, some gold, something like that.
That financial pressure adds a whole other layer to his character. Forces him to make some tough choices, even compromise his morals to ensure the expedition's success.
Okay. And then there's that whole tense voyage on the ship, the Huron. Right from the get-go, you get this feeling that something's not right. And Robyn, she suspects the captain, Mungo St. John, is involved in the slave trade.
Mungo St. John. Now there's a man who embodies the contradictions of the time.
Right, because on the surface, he's this charming, capable captain, but then we see Robyn discovering shackles in the hold of the ship, and she confronts him directly about it.
And let's not forget that brutal punishment of a crew member.
Oh, right. Yeah, Smith doesn't shy away from depicting the cruelty of the slave trade. It's a harsh reality check, and it really puts us face to face with those moral gray areas of the time.
You hit the nail on the head. It wasn't a black and white world. People profited from the slave trade, built their fortunes on the backs of others.
It makes you think about complicity, like how do you even navigate those ethical waters when the whole system is built on such a horrific foundation?
Tough questions, no easy answers.
Definitely not. So we've got these complex characters, this morally ambiguous captain, and then Robyn and Zouga find out that their dad, Fuller, has vanished, disappeared somewhere in the African interior.
Gone missing. Poof. Just like that.
And so, of course, they embark on this desperate quest to find him.
Into the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And that quest becomes this driving force throughout the story, right? It's not just about finding their father, but about finding themselves.
You're right. It's a journey of self-discovery. They face danger, not just from the African wilderness, but from the ethical dilemmas that force them to question their own choices.
Ooh, that's good. Okay, now we're talking layers. And along the way, Zouga encounters all sorts of interesting characters, like Tom Harkness, the trader. He seems to have some vital clues about Fuller's whereabouts, and he gives Zouga a map, but there's also this resentment there, right?
Oh, there's definitely some bad blood between Harkness and Fuller Ballantyne.
Mm-hmm.
Accusations of exploitation, of disrupting the African way of life.
Interesting. So it's not just a simple case of a helpful trader pointing them in the right direction. There's history there, baggage.
Yeah, and Harkness's perspective really highlights how European exploration often relied on and sometimes exploited local knowledge.
Right, and then we have Camacho Pereira, who's hired as a guide, but ends up working against them secretly. It's like something straight out of an adventure novel. Betrayal, intrigue.
Carrera is a slippery character, that's for sure. Adds a whole other layer of danger to their journey.
He does, and Zouga's journey doesn't get any easier. I mean, we're talking near-death experiences with a leopard, a terrifying escape from a wildfire. The story really captures the brutality of trying to survive in such a harsh environment.
It's a reminder of how unforgiving the African wilderness could be. Those early explorers faced incredible challenges.
I can't even imagine. But speaking of challenges, and you mentioned earlier how this novel makes us rethink the past, I think we're getting to that point now. Because Zouga, he becomes obsessed with these stone falcon carvings he finds in a ruined city.
Those falcon carvings, they become a symbol of something bigger, don't they?
It seems like it, right? He believes they hold some sort of key to the secrets of the region, and he becomes determined to take one.
Possession. It was a driving force for many explorers, wasn't it? That desire to claim, to own, to control.
It's making me think about the whole idea of cultural appropriation and how easy it is to look back and judge. But in the moment, I can see how someone like Zouga, caught up in the excitement of discovery, might not fully grasp the implications of his actions.
It's a complicated issue, and it speaks to the larger question of how we understand history. Can we simply apply our modern values to the past? Or do we need to try to see things through the lens of the time?
That's a good question, and it's one that I think we need to keep asking ourselves as we continue to explore a Falcon Flies.
Agreed. And I think the next part of the story will give us even more to think about in that regard, especially when we look at what Robyn goes through.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even gotten to Robyn's story yet, but we'll save that for next time. For now, I think we've covered a lot of ground. What do you think?
I think we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, I like that.
There's so much more to uncover.
This is going to be good.
It is. It really is.
Okay, so last time we left off with Zouga kind of in a standoff with the Matabele and Robyn heading off on her own adventure to find her dad. Sounds pretty dangerous. But before we jump into that, I want to back up a bit.
Back up.
Yeah, like big picture stuff. We're talking 19th century Africa, right? A lot was happening back then.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, European colonialism was at its peak. The slave trade was still, tragically, a reality. And traditional African societies were trying to hold on to their way of life in the face of all this. It was a period of immense change and upheaval.
It was. And A Falcon Flies doesn't sugarcoat any of that, right? Like, we see it most clearly in the relationships between the European explorers and the African people they meet.
Right, right.
For example, Zouga's meeting with Tom Harkness, that trader we talked about, he's got the clues to Fuller Ballantyne's disappearance.
Yeah.
But he also seems to have a serious bone to pick with the guy. With Fuller, I mean.
Yeah, you pick up on that resentment, don't you? It's
Yeah.
like Harkness sees Fuller as this symbol of everything wrong with European interference in Africa.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, he accuses Fuller of exploiting people, disrupting their culture, basically contributing to their suffering. It's a perspective we don't often get in stories about exploration.
He's like, Harkness is giving a voice to the people who are often silenced. It makes you realize there's always more than one side to the story.
Oh, absolutely. And, Harkness's viewpoint kind of challenges that romantic image we often have of the noble explorer.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a reminder that colonialism, for all its supposed benefits, came at a huge human cost.
Huge cost. And that point is driven home even harder when we see how Zouga interacts with Camacho Pereira. That guy who's hired as a guide but turns out to be a real snake in the grass.
Oh, yeah, Pereira. Talk about a guy caught between two worlds. He's got this mixed European and African heritage, and he's constantly having to navigate these complex loyalties, and then boom, he betrays Zouga just for his own gain.
It's a real moral quagmire, isn't it? Pereira embodies those shades of gray that emerge when you've got a society built on such a messed up power structure. He's both a product and a victim of the system.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like you can't just judge these historical figures through a modern lens. You got to try to understand the context.
Absolutely. But at the same time, understanding the context doesn't let anyone off the hook.
True. And while Zouga's dealing with all this betrayal and intrigue, his sister Robyn is facing her own set of challenges.
It's her own set, yeah.
And, she's going through some really heady stuff, both on that ship, the Huron, and then later when she's captured.
Yeah, her encounters with the slavers and their victims.
Mm-hmm.
It's brutal. Smith doesn't hold back in showing the dehumanization, the violence, the absolute disregard for human suffering.
It's a stark contrast to what Zouga is going through. And it raises questions about Robyn's own complicity. Like, how do you reconcile your morals when everyone around you is benefiting from this horrible system?
Especially when you've got feelings for the guy who's at the center of it all. Mungo St. John,
Oh, yeah. It's a complicated situation, to say the least.
Complicated. But that's what makes it so compelling, right? It's a story about navigating a world where the lines between right and wrong are blurred.
Totally. And amidst all this adventure and excitement, there's this constant undercurrent of exploitation and injustice, like that whole standoff between Zouga and the Matabele warriors. Talk about a culture clash.
Oh, yeah, that was intense. And, the Matabele, under their king, Mzilikazi, were a force to be reckoned with. They resisted European influence, had their own traditions, their own military strength. They weren't just going to roll over.
I didn't blame them. They were protecting their land, their way of life.
Exactly. And their resistance forced guys like Zouga to rely on diplomacy and understanding if they wanted to survive.
It makes you think about how different things might have been if there had been more respect and less, well, just grabbing what you want.
You're right.
But even with that respect for African cultures, Zouga, he can't seem to escape that colonial ambition, can he? He finds those stone falcon carvings and he's instantly obsessed.
I am.
Gotta have him. And it raises that whole debate about cultural appropriation, doesn't it? Taking artifacts out of their context, not really caring about their significance.
Oh, for sure. And it's not just about objects either.
No?
No, I mean, Zouga's drive to map everything, to document all the secrets and resources of the land, it speaks to this desire to control and exploit, to own it, to claim it for the outside world. Yeah, you see that a lot in colonial narratives.
It's like we've got this drive to discover, to push boundaries, which is great, but then there's this darker side. This thirst for power and control that leads to, well, to a lot of bad stuff.
And that's the central question in the Falcon Flies, isn't it? Can we have exploration without exploitation?
Deep.
It is. And it's a question that Smith doesn't really give us easy answers to.
No, he doesn't. Instead, he gives us these characters who are both heroic and flawed, capable of great things and, well, not so great things.
Human, basically.
Yeah.
Just like us.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's that bombshell about Fuller Ballantyne finding out that he's dying, and not just from any illness, but from syphilis, likely from a local woman.
It shatters the image of the righteous missionary, doesn't it? Exposes a whole lot of hypocrisy.
It does. And then the family decides to hide the truth, protect their reputation no matter the cost.
Appearances were everything back then.
They still are, in a lot of ways.
True. And it makes you think about how far people will go to protect those they love, even if it means sacrificing their own values.
Right, right.
And it raises questions about truth itself. Like, how do you balance personal loyalty with moral obligations?
Heavy stuff.
It is.
But important stuff. And, these aren't just questions for the 19th century. They're still relevant today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We all face those dilemmas in one way or another. Choices that test our conscience, our loyalties, and the fallout from those choices can be, well, it can be pretty messy.
No doubt it's messy, but I think that's what makes A Falcon Flies so powerful. It's not just an escape. It's a story that forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about history, about the world we live in.
I agree. And it's through this weeding together of the personal and the historical that it really captures our imagination, makes us think, makes us feel.
It does. And I, for one, am eager to see how it all wraps up. Ready for part 3?
Bring it on. I'm ready.
Okay, so we've gone deep into A Falcon Flies, right? We've talked about colonialism, the horrors of slavery, family secrets, moral compromises.
Yeah.
It's been a wild ride. But, I keep coming back to these big questions the book raises. Like, is this just an adventure story? Or is it something more? Something that makes us look at ourselves, at the world, in a different way?
It's definitely both, right? I mean, it's a page-turner, no doubt. But it also holds a mirror up to our own beliefs, our own assumptions.
Right. And one character I keep thinking about is Mungo St. John. He's trying to redeem himself, but it's all kind of messy and self-serving.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, can someone who was so deeply involved in something as awful as the slave trade ever really make amends?
That's a tough one.
It is. And what does real redemption even look like in a situation like that?
These are questions we're still wrestling with today, The legacy of slavery, of colonialism, it's still with us.
It is.
And just like St. John's character makes us think about individual responsibility, the whole novel makes us think about the bigger picture.
Right, like the consequences of our actions, both individually and as a society.
Exactly.
For example, when Clinton Codrington captures St. John, it seems like the right thing to do, right?
Seems like it, yeah.
But it almost causes an international incident.
Almost.
It shows us that even when we're trying to do good, things can get complicated.
Oh, they can. And Codrington's actions, they highlight the whole legal and political mess that came with challenging the system.
Right. Because capturing St. John and putting him on trial for piracy and slave trading, it's not just about one guy, it's about power.
It is.
It's about who gets to make the rules and who has to follow them.
Yeah.
And speaking of challenging the system, remember when Robyn asks St. John to free the slaves without any compensation?
Yeah.
It's like she's hitting at the heart of the problem.
Yeah.
Can you really dismantle something as deeply rooted as slavery without addressing the economic interests that are driving it?
It's a debate that's been going on for centuries.
Yeah, and it's still going on today.
Absolutely. How do we create a more just world while also recognizing the realities of power and money?
It's tough.
It is.
And a Falcon Flies, it doesn't give us any easy answers. But it makes us think about these questions, which is a good start, right?
It is. And, it's not just about the big picture stuff.
Yeah.
No, it's also about the personal struggles of these characters.
Uh-huh.
Their ambitions, their desires, their search for meaning in a world that's changing so fast.
Right. It's about family, loyalty, love, loss, things we can all relate to no matter what time period we're living in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's why historical fiction can be so powerful.
How so?
It transports us to another time and place. But ultimately, it's about us.
About us.
It shows us that the human experience, it's timeless.
Mm-hmm.
We're all grappling with the same basic questions, the same challenges.
Yeah, and maybe, just maybe, by understanding the past, we can make better choices in the present.
I like that.
Me too. It's like the novel gives us this homework assignment. Yeah, to think critically about the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we inherit from history, to be more aware of our own biases, our own blind spots.
To challenge the narratives that have shaped our understanding of the world.
Exactly. And to recognize the power of stories to change us, to make us more empathetic, more engaged, more willing to fight for a better future.
Well said.
So yeah, this deep dive into A Falcon Flies, it's been enlightening. It's made me think. It's made me feel.
Me too.
It's a story that sticks with you.
It does.
And ultimately, I think that's the mark of a truly great book.
We couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining me on this journey.
My pleasure.
And to all you listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those pages turning.